In this course, we are going to shift gears and move to another topic in called inventory management. In short, it's also called IM. If you remember the first part of the series, I've told you that has three pillars on which it stands. The first pillar is procurement. The second pillar is inventory management. And the third pillar is CBP, or consumption based planning. It's a kind of planning that's more closely related to MRP. So these are the three pillars on which SAP stands. Now we have covered some part of procurement. And before we go and understand more of procurement, like more processes, more configuration, what we need now is a better understanding of the overall process. So that's why we are shifting gears and we're going to learn IM in this course. So this course is dedicated to IM. And after that, we're going to move on to CBP, consumption-based planning. In general terms, this is called MRP. But MRP is not just CBP. There's much more than that. So what we are going to learn specifically is CBP in the next course. But this course focuses on IM, inventory management. And once we have finished IM and CBP, we're going to circle back to procurement, which comprises of the bulk of SAP MM. Procurement comprises probably about 60% of entire MM. IM is probably 25%. CBP is probably 15%. So what is IM? IM, or inventory management, is how the company manages its own inventory. Say this is our plant or coffee shop, Chicago. The vendor supplies the goods into our plant, or if we don't like the goods, he could as well take that away. So this is the vendor. And this entire process is called procurement. On the other hand, we sell stuff from our plant to our customer, right? We sell coffee, we sell pastry, we sell all kinds of things. This is our customer. And the customer could return some of the stuff as well, right? If he doesn't like the coffee, he could return the stuff back to us. So this process is sales. So procurement is part of MM and sales is part of SD. Now, where does inventory management fit in? Of course, it's part of MM, but in this big picture, where does IM fit in? Any movement of goods within the company is called inventory management. Sometimes it need not even be movement. I would rather say management of goods within the company is called inventory management. For example, let's take the same old Chicago plant. This is the Chicago plant. This Chicago plant is associated or has so many different storage locations. So what's a storage location? We know a storage location is just a warehouse or a part of a warehouse. So there are so many different storage locations, right? One storage location for coffee, one storage location for raw materials, one storage location for baked goods. Movement of goods between raw material and coffee is an example of management of goods that's completely internal to the company. The vendor doesn't care, the customer doesn't care. The ownership of goods is not changing, isn't it? It's all within the company. If you have a question on why we would do that, think about some simple examples. The vendor has delivered the coffee, but instead of putting it in the coffee storage location, we have put it in the raw material storage location. It's a mistake on our part. What do? We don't have anything to do with the vendor now. We just have to move it from the raw material to the coffee storage location. It's a physical movement of goods, and the storage locations could be like a mile apart, or 10 feet apart, or cities apart. That depends on how our warehouse and storage locations are set up. But the point you have to understand is this is completely an internal process, internal to the company. So nothing to do with the vendor, nothing to do with the customer, nothing to do with any external party. This is one example of an IM activity, inventory management activity. Is it only between storage locations? Not necessarily. Say, for example, I have a plant in San Francisco. If I move goods between the Chicago plant and the San Francisco plant, or vice versa, that's also considered an example of internal movement of goods. Nothing to do with the vendor, nothing to do with the customer or any other external party. And so it becomes an example of an IM activity, inventory management activity. Another example. Say in Chicago, at the end of the year or at the end of the month, we have to just calculate how much inventory we have. Inventory counting is an example of an inventory management activity. It's internal to the company, right? So we count the inventory, make sure that what is reflected in SAP is what we have really as stock. This just ensures that the system is in sync with what really is there physically. And it also is a kind of an audit activity. When I mean audit, it just means double checking. Don't worry about that word, audit. So inventory management involves movement of goods within the company or across company codes, or activities like inventory counting, or activities like quality management. Another activity is related to quality. For example, when coffee comes in, you just don't accept it as it is, right? You have your own internal quality controls. You check for molds, you check for color, you check for flavor, all different kinds of things. After you do that, you put it into your stock. But until that point, it's stock that's still under inspection. So how do you differentiate the different stock? Something that's still in quality versus something that we can readily use. Well, there is something called stock types that we are going to know. But quality is an example of an activity that's internal to the company, isn't it? Nothing to do with the vendor. If we don't like it, we'll send it back to the vendor. That's a different story. But checking for quality is an example of an activity that we do internally within the company. So movement of goods within the company, counting of goods, quality are all examples of inventory management activities. In the next chapter, we'll start with some examples of internal movement of goods.